It is just after dawn on the 8th of April, 2009, roughly 240 nautical miles off the coast of Somalia. A barefoot young man hooks the end of an aluminum ladder over the steel rail of a ship that weighs 17,000 tons, an American container vessel, the Maersk, Alabama. He has an assault rifle slung across his back and 3 companions in a small open boat below him. And between them, they intend to capture a ship 200 times longer than the skiff they arrived in. His name, when the world finally demands one, will be Abdulwali Moose. He will tell a courtroom in New York that he is 16. He will also, at other moments, claim to be 18, 19, and 26. Nobody, including his own mother, will ever be able to prove which is true. What Muse does not yet know, as his bare foot finds the first rung, is that this single climb will end with 3 of his friends shot dead by American snipers and himself buried inside a United States prison until he is an old man. This is the story of the hidden economy that put that ladder in his hands. A kingdom of ransom built on the world's most lawless sea. To understand how a teenager in a plastic boat came to hold the crew of an American ship, you have to go back almost 20 years to the moment an entire country simply stopped existing. In 1991, the government of Somalia collapsed. Not weakened, collapsed. The state, the army, the courts, the Coast Guard, gone. What remained was a coastline over 3,000 kilometers long, the longest in mainland Africa, suddenly with no one to guard it. And the world noticed almost immediately. Foreign fishing fleets came first. From the early 1990s, trawlers, many of them Chinese, Taiwanese, Korean, and European, moved into Somali waters that no navy was protecting. They scraped the seabed with industrial nets, took tuna and lobster and shark by the thousands of tons, and did it in the fishing grounds that coastal villages had worked by hand for generations. Some ships, according to United Nations reporting from the period, went further still, using Somalia's ungoverned coast as a dump, quietly emptying barrels of industrial and toxic waste into waters no government would ever test. For the men of towns like Ale, a small fishing settlement in the northern region of Puntland, this was not an abstraction. It was their livelihood being hauled over the horizon by strangers. One of those men was a lobster diver named Abshir Abdullahi, a fisherman the world would later know simply as Boya. By his own account, Boya had dived for lobster off Ale until the mid-1990s, when the foreign fleet stripped the reefs bare, and the lobster and the living they made disappeared. So Boya and men like him made a decision that would, within a decade, ripple out to every shipping company on Earth. If no Coast Guard would stop the foreign ships, they would become the Coast Guard themselves. That is the phrase they used, and it mattered. The early pirates did not call themselves pirates, they called themselves Bada Dinta Bada, roughly saviors of the sea. And to the outside press, they called themselves the Somali Coast Guard. They would board a foreign trawler fishing illegally, and they would levy a fine. The fine, of course, went into their own pockets, but in the beginning, it wore the clothes of justice, and in a country with no other law, plenty of people believed it. Here is the thing about a fine collected at gunpoint from a ship worth millions of dollars. It works, and once it works once, the logic of it is almost impossible to stop, because the men of Isle quickly learned a second lesson, and it was the lesson that built the kingdom. It did not actually matter whether the ship they seized had been fishing illegally at all. A cargo vessel passing through the Gulf of Aden, hundreds of miles from any fishing ground, was worth vastly more than any trawler. Its owners were insured. Its owners were reachable by satellite phone. And its owners, faced with a crew held at gunpoint, would pay. The grievance had been real. What it turned into was a business. Let's talk about how that business actually worked, because it was far more organized than the word pirate suggests. This was not chaos. It was a system with roles, with investors, and with a startup cost. A hijacking began on land, with money. A financier, often a former businessman, sometimes a former official, would put up the capital, the skiffs, the outboard motors, the fuel, the rifles, the ladders, the food and water for a crew of young men who might be at sea for days. In return, the financier took the largest single share of whatever ransom came back. The men who actually climbed the ladders, teenagers like Muse, from inland villages, many of whom could barely swim, were the infantry, and they took the smallest cut. Though to a boy from a drought-stricken village, even the smallest cut was a fortune he could never otherwise imagine. Out at sea, the method was brutally simple. 2 or 3 skiffs would fan out along a shipping lane. When they spotted a target, they closed in fast from behind, where the ship's wake was flattest, firing rifles and sometimes rocket-propelled grenades into the air to force the captain to slow. Then, they threw up the ladder. If they could get even one man onto the deck of a moving vessel before it accelerated away, the ship was theirs, because no unarmed merchant crew was going to fight a man with an automatic weapon. To reach the busy lanes far offshore, the pirates developed their master stroke, the mothership. They would capture a slow, sturdy fishing dhow, keep its crew hostage aboard, and use it as a floating base, towing their attack skiffs hundreds of miles out into the Indian Ocean, far beyond the reach of any coastal patrol. It meant that no shipping lane in the region was safe, no matter how far from land. And once a ship was taken, the real work began. And it did not involve violence at all. It involved patience. The captured vessel would be sailed back toward the Somali coast, toward anchorages off towns like Eel, and there it would sit, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, while negotiators haggled by phone with the ship's owners and insurers, thousands of miles away in London or Athens or Dubai. The crew was the collateral. The number went up and down, and eventually, almost always, the money came. For a stretch of years in the late 2000s, this system turned a stretch of impoverished Somali coast into one of the strangest boom economies on the planet. In the pirate anchorage towns, restaurants opened to feed the hostage crews. Local businessmen bought shares in upcoming hijackings the way others might buy stock. Young men who had owned nothing came home with cars and wives and cash. The Canadian Somali journalist Jay Bahadur, who traveled to Puntland and interviewed pirate bosses, including Boya face to face, titled his account of what he found the pirates of Somalia, Inside Their Hidden World, because that is what it was. A whole society running on ransom that almost no outsider ever saw. It's early April 2009, and this hidden world is about to collide at full speed with the United States Navy. Which brings us back to the ladder and to the barefoot young man on the rail of the Maersk, Alabama. On the 8th of April, Muse and 3 others got a man aboard the Alabama and seized her. The first time in some 200 years that pirates had captured a United States-flagged ship. But the Alabama's crew did not behave the way the script demanded. They had disabled the ship, hidden in a secure compartment, and by some accounts captured one of the pirates themselves in the struggle. The hijacking that was supposed to end with a slow sail back to Isle instead unraveled within hours. Cornered, the pirates took the one piece of collateral they could still control, the ship's captain, Richard Phillips. They forced him into the Alabama's enclosed lifeboat, a small covered vessel barely bigger than the skiff they had arrived in, and set out for the Somali coast, hundreds of miles away, with Phillips as their hostage. They did not get there. What they got instead was the destroyer USS Bainbridge, then a second warship, then a third, then a Navy SEAL team parachuted into the ocean under cover of darkness. For 4 days, from the 8th to the 12th of April, an enclosed orange lifeboat drifted on the Indian Ocean, 4 young Somali men and 1 American captain inside it. shadowed by the most powerful navy in human history. It ended on the 12th of April. Muse had left the lifeboat and gone aboard the Bainbridge. By the accounts of the operation, to be treated for a wound and to continue negotiations. That left 3 pirates and Phillips in the lifeboat. When the snipers on the Bainbridge's fantail judged that the captain's life was in immediate danger, they fired 3 shots in near darkness from one moving vessel to another. 3 pirates, 3 shots, all 3 dead. Richard Phillips was pulled from the lifeboat alive, and Abdouali Muse, the one who had climbed aboard first, the one who happened to be on the warship when the rest of his crew was killed, became the only one to survive. He was flown to New York to stand trial in a federal court, the first person charged with piracy in an American courtroom in over a century. Now hold on to that ladder for one more moment, because this is where the whole improbable arithmetic of the pirate economy comes due. Muse's lawyers argued he was a child, pushed into the boat by older men. Prosecutors argued he was a willing, brutal hijacker who had taken part in other attacks in the weeks before the Alabama. His true age was never established. Yet the court settled on treating him as an adult, and at his sentencing he was described as 21. On the 18th of May, 2010, he pleaded guilty to hijacking, kidnapping, and hostage-taking. On the 16th of February, 2011, a federal judge sentenced him to 405 months in prison, nearly 34 years. He had climbed one ladder. The price, converted into time, was most of a human life. And here is the reversal that the sniper fire nearly hid. Killing 3 teenagers in a lifeboat did almost nothing to stop the machine that had sent them. If anything, the years right after the Maersk, Alabama were the peak. The numbers are staggering, and they are the largest in this story, so save them for last. Between 2009 and 2011, pirates operating off Somalia carried out at least 95 successful hijackings. The year 2011 alone saw more than 240 pirate attacks in the region, the highest ever recorded. In 2010, over $110 million was paid out in ransoms. And across the full span of the boom, from 2005 to 2012, World Bank researchers estimated that more than $400 million in ransom money flowed to Somali pirates from roughly 179 hijacked ships. While the total cost to the world economy in insurance, rerouting, and naval deployments was measured not in the millions, but in the billions, some $7 billion in the single year of 2011. At its height, thousands of seafarers, Filipino, Indian, Ukrainian, and more, ordinary men working ordinary jobs, sat at anchor off the Somali coast as human collateral, some of them held for years. So how did it end? Not with snipers. It ended when the world made the business stop paying. The turn came from 2 directions at once. Navies from more than 24 countries, American, European, Chinese, Indian, Russian, began patrolling the Gulf of Aden and the Indian Ocean in a coordinated way no single fleet ever could have. And more decisively, the shipping industry did the unglamorous thing. Vessels raised their speed and their railings, posted lookouts, ran razor wire along their decks, and most important of all, began carrying armed private security teams. It turned out that the entire pirate model depended on one fragile fact, that the men on the merchant ship were unarmed. Put 3 riflemen on the deck of a container ship, and a teenager with a hooked ladder no longer has a business. The collapse was almost as fast as the rise. By 2012, the number of successful hijackings off Somalia had fallen to 8, the lowest in years. The anchorages emptied, the restaurants that had fed the hostages closed, the financiers moved their money elsewhere. Boya, the lobster diver who had helped invent the whole enterprise, was arrested in Puntland in 2010 and jailed. The kingdom he had described to a visiting journalist as a kind of righteous coast guard was, by then, understood by nearly everyone, including many Somalis, for what it had become: a protection racket run against the crews of the world, most of them as poor and as far from home as the pirates themselves. The grievance at the root of it never went away. The foreign trawlers that helped empty Aile's waters in the 1990s were never held to account, and in the years since, with the naval patrols thinned out, there have been warnings that piracy off Somalia is stirring again. The sea that produced Abduwali Muse is still there. So is the poverty. So are the ships, passing close to a coast where, for a few years, the poorest men in the region reached up with a ladder and made the richest trade routes on Earth pay them tribute. Muse, for his part, remains in a United States federal prison. If the youngest age he ever claimed was the true one, he was a boy of 16 when he grabbed that rail. He will be, at the earliest, in his late 40s before he is free. An old man by the standards of the coast he came from, sentenced in a language he did not speak, for climbing a ladder that someone richer than him had paid to have built. The world calls it the end of Somali piracy. The men of Isle might tell you the fishing never came back either. If you want to know which hidden world we should reconstruct next, tell us in the comments.